There was a woman in my neighborhood growing up. Her name was Carol. Nice house, two cars, always had fresh flowers on the porch. Her husband worked at the plant. She worked part-time at a dentist office. They weren't rich, but they looked comfortable, put three kids through school, took a vacation every summer. From the outside, they had figured it out. I ran into Carol at a grocery store about 4 years ago. She was 71. She was working the checkout line. Not as a greeter, not as a part-time hobby job to fill her Tuesday afternoons. She was working because she had to. Her husband had passed 2 years earlier. The house was sold to cover his medical bills, and the retirement they thought they had built over 4 decades of showing up and doing the right things had turned out to be a beautiful illusion built on a foundation that nobody had ever checked. Carol did not have a spending problem. She did not blow money on designer bags or luxury trips. She was not financially reckless in any way most people would recognize. What Carol had was a wealth storage problem. She and her husband had put everything into things that felt like wealth: the house, the cars, the stuff, and almost nothing into things that could actually fund a life when the paycheck stopped. I think about Carol a lot when I talk about money, because Carol is not rare. Carol is the rule, not the exception. And the worst part is that the system she trusted, work hard, save a little, own a home, everything will be fine, that system is not designed to protect people like her. It is designed to look like it is. My name is Susan, and I have spent years studying the gap between what people think they are building and what they are actually building. If you have ever looked at your financial situation and felt like you were doing everything right, but the math still does not seem to add up, subscribe and stick with me, because this video is going to reframe something that most financial advice never touches. It is not about stock picks. It is not about budgeting apps. It's about understanding the difference between wealth that looks real and wealth that actually works. And once you see the difference, you cannot unsee it. Let me start with a story that has nothing to do with personal finance. Stick with me here. In 1720, there was a company in England called the South Sea Company. On paper, it was extraordinary. It had an exclusive trading monopoly with South America. The British government had given it a massive chunk of national debt to manage in exchange for shares. The aristocracy was invested, Parliament was invested, the king was invested. The share price went from around £100 to over £1,000 in under a year. People were selling their estates, their jewelry, their inheritances to buy in. One investor reportedly made £7,000 in a single day. That was a fortune that would take most people several lifetimes to earn through actual work. Here's the thing about the South Sea Company. It barely traded anything. The monopoly with South America existed mostly on paper, because Spain controlled those ports and was not exactly handing them over willingly. The profits that investors were expecting were, at best, theoretical, at worst, invented. What the South Sea Company was actually selling was the idea of wealth, the appearance of wealth, the feeling of participating in something too big to fail. By the end of 1720, the stock had crashed back to nearly where it started. Fortunes built over generations were erased in months. Isaac Newton, one of the smartest people in the history of human civilization, lost the equivalent of about $3 million in today's money. He reportedly said afterward that he could calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. What happened in 1720 is the same thing that keeps happening, just in different clothes, in different eras, in different markets. The form changes, the mechanism stays identical. People confuse the appearance of wealth with actual wealth. They invest in stories instead of structures. And by the time the difference becomes obvious, it is too late to do much about it. Now here's where this connects to your life right now, today, in 2026. Because most people are not losing their savings in stock bubbles. Most people are losing their savings the slow way, the quiet way, the way that does not make headlines and does not feel like a disaster until it suddenly is. I want to introduce you to a concept I call the illusion of accumulation. It goes like this. You work, you earn, you buy things. The things have value on paper. Your net worth, according to any spreadsheet, looks reasonable. You own a home, you have equity, you have a car paid off, maybe a small retirement account. From the outside, from your own internal narrative, you are building something. But here's the question that almost nobody asks until it's too late. How much of what you have can you actually live on? Let me make this concrete. Take two families. Both households earn similar incomes over 30 years. We'll call them the Hendersons and the Kellys. The Hendersons did what most people do. They bought a house early and put everything into it. They upgraded when the kids came. They traded in the cars every few years because it felt financially smart to always have something reliable. They kept a small savings account because emergencies happen. When they got raises, they raised their lifestyle a little each time, the way everyone around them did. They felt financially responsible because they had no debt beyond the mortgage, and they owned things that had value. When Mr. Henderson retired at 66, they had a home worth $520,000, two paid-off vehicles, and $112,000 in a 401k that had been paused and restarted over the years as life happened. The Kellys bought a smaller house than they could technically afford and kept it. They drove boring cars for a decade past when their friends traded up. When they got raises, they raised their 401k contributions before they raised their lifestyle. They looked like the people who had less. No new kitchen renovation, no lake house weekends. Their kids' friends had nicer things. But every year, quietly, automatically, money moved into accounts that were building something that had nothing to do with what you could see in the driveway. When Mrs. Kelly retired at 63, 3 years earlier than Mr. Henderson, she had a home worth $310,000, two very ordinary cars, and $1.4 million in retirement accounts. The Hendersons' net worth looks competitive with the Kellys on a spreadsheet. The houses and cars close the gap. But here's the question that actually matters. How much income can each family generate every year without either working or selling their home? Using the 4% rule, the guideline that says you can pull 4% annually and have a very high probability of never running out of money, the Kellys can generate about $56,000 a year from their investments alone. Add Social Security, and they're living comfortably on around $80,000 annually without touching the house, without selling anything, without working. The Hendersons can generate about $4,500 in their retirement account. Their house is worth a lot, but they live in it. Their cars are worth something, but they need them. To access the wealth sitting in the walls of their home, they would need to sell it and move somewhere cheaper, or take out a reverse mortgage with terms that are complicated and often not in the borrower's favor. Their wealth looks real, but it can't feed them. This is the quiet wealth trap. It is not dramatic. Nobody goes broke overnight. The disaster arrives slowly. Then, all at once, the first time a major medical bill lands or a car needs replacing, and the math stops working. Now, I want to pause here and say something important. I am not telling you that owning a home is a mistake. I am not telling you that enjoying your life while you build wealth is wrong. I am saying that the difference between the Hendersons and the Kellys was not income. It was not luck. It was one decision repeated over decades. What kind of asset does this money become? There is a concept in finance called asset liquidity. It just means how easily can you convert something into spendable cash. A treasury bill is extremely liquid. You can sell it in seconds. A home is illiquid. Selling it takes months, involves massive transaction costs, and usually requires you to find somewhere else to live. The financial system constantly pushes you toward illiquid assets, homes, cars, physical stuff, because that is where it makes its money. Mortgages, auto loans, home equity lines, every illiquid asset you accumulate is a transaction fee for someone else. The financial industry is not evil, it is just structured around incentives that do not perfectly align with yours. And once you understand that, you start making different decisions. Let me give you a different historical anchor, because the South Sea Company was dramatic and easy to see coming in hindsight. This one is quieter and harder to argue with. In 1965, if you had put $10,000 into the median American home, you would own something that grew to roughly $280,000 by 2024. That sounds incredible until you realize you also needed somewhere to live the entire time, so you cannot count the full value unless you sell and downsize. The actual accessible gain, after accounting for property taxes, maintenance, insurance, and the fact that you have to live somewhere, is significantly lower than the headline number suggests. If you had instead put that same $10,000 into the S&P 500 index in 1965, reinvesting dividends, that same amount would be worth somewhere north of $4 million by 2024. You could have also lived somewhere the whole time. You would have just rented or owned a modest home while the invested money worked independently of where you slept. The gap between those two outcomes is not explained by intelligence. It is explained by understanding what kind of asset is actually building your future. Now, before you feel like I'm about to tell you to rent forever and never own anything, let me introduce the actual framework that makes the difference. It is not about what you own, it's about the ratio of your working assets to your display assets. Working assets are things that generate returns without you doing anything. Index funds, dividend stocks, rental income, small business equity. Display assets are things that have value but sit there looking valuable. The house you live in, the cars, the renovation, the stuff. Most people spend their entire lives accidentally optimizing for display assets while underbuilding their working assets. And here's what nobody tells you about display assets. They have a sneaky carrying cost. The bigger the house, the higher the property taxes, the more maintenance, the more insurance, the more utilities. The newer the car, the higher the insurance, the faster the depreciation, the bigger the payment. Your display assets are quietly extracting money from you every month, money that could be building your working pile. I want to tell you about a pattern I've noticed in the people who actually make it, not the people who look like they made it, the Carol next door with the fresh flowers and the cars in the driveway, but the people who hit 60 with real options. Every single one of them, without exception, treated their retirement account contributions the way most people treat their rent. Non-negotiable, off the top, not what was left over after everything else. First. And they didn't let their lifestyle grow as fast as their income. When they got a raise, they increased their contribution percentage before they increased their spending. Sometimes they did both, but the working assets always got fed first. This sounds simple. It is, but simple and easy are not the same thing. Here's where the psychology gets interesting. Our brains are wired to value what we can see and touch over what is abstract. A new couch feels real. An extra contribution to a retirement account feels like nothing. You can't sit on it, you can't show it to guests, there's no emotional payoff in the moment. But that abstraction is exactly where wealth lives. Psychologists call this present bias. We systematically overvalue immediate rewards over future ones. $1 today feels worth more than $1 next year, even when the math says the invested dollar next year is worth more. This is not a moral failing, it's biology. It's the same wiring that kept our ancestors alive by prioritizing food today over planning for winter. The problem is that the financial world is designed to exploit that wiring at every turn. Every advertisement you see is selling you a reason to spend now. Every upgrade, every new model, every renovation trend is engineered to make you feel like the current version of your life is slightly inadequate. And when you fix the inadequacy, when you get the kitchen you deserve or the car that finally feels right, there is a brief moment of satisfaction followed by a return to baseline, and then the next thing appears to want. The people who build real wealth figure out how to break that cycle, not by becoming ascetics who never enjoy anything, but by creating systems that move money into working assets automatically before the spending impulse can intercept it. Here's the action framework I would give to anyone at any stage of this journey. The first thing I would do is look at the ratio. Take everything you own and divide it into two columns. Working assets on one side, investments, retirement accounts, anything that generates returns, and display assets on the other, the house, the cars, the renovation, the stuff. For most people, that ratio is shockingly skewed toward display assets. That's not a judgment, it's just data, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. The second thing is to pay yourself before you can think about it. Set up an automatic transfer to your investment account on the day after your paycheck hits. If it never appears in your checking account, you can't spend it. The number doesn't have to be enormous to start. The habit matters more than the size. You're training the financial muscle. You're building the behavioral pattern that scales up as income grows. The third thing is to create a rule about raises. Every time your income increases, a predetermined percentage of that increase goes into investments before it ever touches your lifestyle. I know people who do 50%. Anything above 25% changes your trajectory meaningfully over a decade. The key is that it's a rule, not a decision. Decisions rely on willpower in the moment. Rules run on autopilot. The fourth thing, and this is the one that most people find hardest, is to stop optimizing your life for what other people can see. The cars, the house upgrades, the stuff. A significant portion of what we spend is driven by social comparison, not actual need or even genuine preference. When you peel that layer away and ask what you actually want your day-to-day life to feel like, most people find the answer doesn't require as much as they thought. Comfort, security, time, interesting work, people you love, none of those are on the display asset list. Now, let me be clear about something. I am not advocating for a joyless, deprived existence where you stare at a brokerage account instead of enjoying your life. That is not wealth. That is just a different kind of trap. What I am advocating for is intentionality, spending on the things that genuinely matter to you and investing in your future with the things that do not. The research on this is actually quite comforting. Studies on consumer happiness consistently find that beyond a moderate income level, additional spending on material goods produces very little lasting satisfaction. What does produce lasting satisfaction is time freedom, meaningful relationships, feeling secure, and having options, all of which are generated more reliably by a healthy investment portfolio than by a nicer car. Let me give you one more scenario to make this concrete. Meet two women, both 35. We will call them Diana and Priya. Diana earns $72,000 a year. She has a nice apartment, a car she loves, goes out most weekends, takes 2 vacations a year. She contributes 4% to her 401k because that is the minimum to get the company match. She feels like she is living well. She is. But she is also, without realizing it, trading decades of future freedom for current comfort. Priya earns $68,000 a year, slightly less than Diana. She has a smaller apartment, a perfectly functional car she has driven for 7 years, cooks most nights, takes 1 bigger trip a year instead of 2 smaller ones. She contributes 15% to her 401k and has a small taxable brokerage account she adds to every month. Her life, from the outside, looks less exciting than Diana's, but her working asset ratio is completely different. Fast forward to age 55. Diana has about $180,000 in retirement accounts. She has had to pause contributions a few times over the years, a job change, a car replacement, an unexpected expense. Her lifestyle is still good, but the math is starting to feel tight. She does the calculation for the first time and realizes she would need to work until 70 to retire with any comfort. That number hits differently at 55 than it would have at 35. Priya, at 55, has just crossed $900,000 in retirement and investment accounts. Her contributions are now being dwarfed by market returns. She has options Diana does not have. She can stay in her job because she likes it, not because she has to. She can take a lower stress role without worrying about the pay cut. She can see the finish line. She is, in every way that actually matters, more free. Same generation, same city, same general life arc. The difference was one decision repeated, Where does the next dollar go? This is not a story about deprivation. Priya took a vacation every year. She had a life. She just chose again and again to feed the working pile first. I want to address the objection I know some of you are forming right now. What about housing as an investment? Is it not better to own than to rent? And is home equity not a form of wealth? Home equity is a form of wealth, I am not disputing that, but it is a specific and limited form of wealth, and most people dramatically overestimate how it functions as a retirement asset. You cannot eat home equity without selling or borrowing. Selling means moving, which has costs and disruptions. Borrowing means paying interest, which erodes the value. And the return on housing, when you net out the carrying costs, taxes, maintenance, insurance, the opportunity cost of the down payment, is considerably lower than most people assume, especially compared to a diversified stock index over a 30-year window. This does not mean renting forever is the right answer for everyone. It means treating your primary residence as your entire retirement plan is a mistake, which is exactly what most people in Carol's generation did, and which is exactly what a lot of people in your generation are doing right now without realizing it. Let me give you the bigger picture frame here, because this is not just about individual decisions. There are structural forces in 2026 that make the quiet wealth trap more dangerous than it was for your parents' generation. The pension, that beautiful system where you worked for a company for 30 years and they paid you a monthly check forever, is essentially extinct in the private sector. The burden of retirement planning has been shifted entirely onto individuals, and individuals, left to their own devices, default to the thing that feels like progress, visible, tangible accumulation, rather than the thing that actually builds income for their future selves. Social Security, which most people are counting on as the foundation of retirement, faces real structural challenges. The math on the trust fund has been discussed in policy circles for years, and the numbers are not comfortable. I'm not saying it disappears. I'm saying treating it as your primary retirement income strategy is a risk that the people who planned carefully do not have to take. Healthcare is the variable that destroys more retirement plans than almost anything else. A major illness in your late 60s or 70s can generate costs that no fixed income budget survives. The people with real investment portfolios have flexibility that the people relying entirely on Social Security and a small 401k simply do not. All of this points to the same conclusion. The safety nets that previous generations could rely on have been quietly removed or made less reliable, and the financial industry has filled the gap with products that benefit the industry. The answer to that is not panic. It is not complex financial maneuvering. It is simply building your own working asset pile consistently before life can spend it for you. Here's what I want you to walk away with. The first thing is this: check your ratio. Look at what you actually own and figure out how much of it could generate income if you never worked again. That's your real number. Not your net worth, not your home equity, the number that funds your life. The second thing is to start treating your future self as a bill you pay every month, non-negotiable, automatic, first. Not because deprivation is virtuous, but because your future self is a real person who is going to have to live inside the decisions you make right now. That person deserves the same consideration you give your landlord. The third thing is to resist the quiet pull toward display assets and toward visible progress. Our culture celebrates the upgrade and the acquisition. It has no ceremony for the person who maxed out their Roth IRA for the 7th year in a row. That person, boring and invisible as they appear, is building something that the person with the showroom kitchen is not. Carol worked the checkout line at 71. She was not stupid. She was not reckless. She was a person who trusted a system that was never designed to protect people like her, and she paid the price for that trust. You do not have to. The people who avoid Carol's fate are not the ones who made more money. They are the ones who made better decisions about where that money went. They fed the working pile first, kept the display pile honest, and let time and compounding do the rest. It's not complicated, it's just hard, and the difference between those two things is everything. Boring index funds, automatic contributions, and decades of patience have built real freedom than anything flashy ever will.